The Great Silence. The last human ship to leave the Galactic Council chambers was the Stargazer, an old diplomatic cruiser, its hull scarred from 1,000 near misses and one direct hit over the Proxima siege. It didn't flee, it didn't retreat. It simply undocked, its magnetic clamps releasing with a soft, final sigh that echoed in the vast, silent chamber. Captain Ava Rostova, a woman whose face was a roadmap of the Third Galactic War, stood on the bridge, not looking back at the grand celestial ballet of the Citadel, but forward into the stardusted blackness of the void. The war had been a meat grinder. The Kalthar Imperium, a species of silicon-based zealots, had sought to purge the galaxy of all impure carbon life. Humanity, alongside the stoic crystalline Tholians and the mercurial gas-dwelling Lumina, had formed the backbone of the resistance. They had fought on worlds of choking ammonia, in the coronas of blue giants, and in the whisper-thin nebulae where starships died like fireflies in a storm. They had won, but the cost was written in fields of dead stars and the names of 100 billion ghosts. After the signing of the Treaty of Cygnus X1, the galaxy expected humanity to take its rightful place at the head of the Council. They had bled the most, sacrificed the most, innovated the most terrifying weapons and the most brilliant strategies. Instead, they did the unthinkable. They went home. One by one, their fleets disengaged from patrol routes, their colonies packed up, world by world, shipping everything from atmospheric processors to children's toys back to the Sol system. Their ambassadors delivered a single, simple message to the Council, translated into every known language and dialect. "We are finished." And then they left. The Great Silence began. The interstellar relays that had once chattered with human commerce, their art, their endless noisy debates, fell quiet. The Sol system, once a blazing beacon of trade and culture, became a dark spot on the galactic map, quarantined by a network of ancient, self-repairing warning buoys. The human experiment, it seemed, was over. The galaxy, wounded and weary, moved on, leaving humanity to its self-imposed exile, a ghost story told to frighten young civilizations about the true cost of war. The Forgotten Species. 300 standard galactic cycles passed. Stars were born and died. Empires rose from the ashes of the Third War, built on the bones of older forgotten ones. Humanity was no longer a ghost story. They were a myth. To the young, ambitious Veskar, a species of reptilian expansionists who had been chipping rocks on their homeworld during the Great War, humans were a footnote in the Galactic Codex, a species that had flared brightly and then inexplicably extinguished itself. The Veskar saw the quarantined Sol system not as a tomb, but as a treasure chest. They imagined vaults of forgotten military technology, dormant fleets waiting for a new master, weapons that could give them the edge they needed to finally supplant the aging Tholian Confederacy as the dominant power on the Council. The human legends spoke of weapons that could crack planets and strategies that could break the morale of an entire species. The Veskar salivated at the thought. In the gleaming, sterile halls of the Galactic Citadel, the Veskar ambassador, a hulking brute named Kithar, all scales and controlled aggression, argued that the quarantine was an archaic relic. They are gone, dead, dust. Their legacy is a resource, sitting unused while the living galaxy faces new threats. We must unseal the Sol system. We must learn from their mistakes and their triumphs. The Tholian ambassador, a crystalline entity that communicated through harmonic resonance, shimmered with disapproval. Its chimes were low and mournful. They asked for one thing: to be left alone. Peace was their final treaty. To break it is to dishonor the memory of all who fell in the Great War. But the galaxy had a short memory. The allure of forgotten power was too strong. The younger races, born in the long peace that followed the war, were restless. They saw the Tholians as stagnant, clinging to old traditions. They saw the Vistar as the future. The vote was cast. The quarantine was to be lifted. An expedition would be sent. Kithar smiled, a brief, predatory flash of teeth. The age of myth was over. The age of salvage had begun. The Council's debate. The debate chamber was a sphere of intelligent light, accommodating 100 different biologies. The air shimmered, thick with the tension of a dozen competing atmospheres and 1,000 unspoken threats. TCH stood at the center, his armored scales reflecting the soft glow of the Tholian delegation. For 3 centuries we have honored this sentiment, TCH spat, the word dripping with disdain. We have respected the great silence while our own borders shrink, while pirate clans emboldened by council inaction prey on our worlds. The humans were masters of war. Their archives could hold the key to permanent stability. To deny the galaxy this resource is not just sentimental, it is irresponsible. An elder Lumina, a being of pure swirling energy contained within a complex magnetic field, pulsed a soft violet light. Its voice was a chorus of whispers. You speak of stability, T, but your fleet movements speak of conquest. You seek a sword, not a shield. Humanity laid down their sword. What gives you the right to pick it up? The right of the living, T roared, slamming a clawed fist on the podium. The sound cracked through the chamber. The right of those who did not quit. They abandoned the galaxy they helped save. Their legacy is forfeit. We, the T, and our allies, he gestured to the assembled delegations of the Glyptons and the Fen, species eager for a taste of T's promised spoils, are prepared to take on the burden they cast aside. The Tholian ambassador's light intensified, its resonant chimes sharp and clear. It is not a burden you seek, but a throne. You have studied the archives of the Third War. You have read of the human weapon known as the psychic scream, a device that broadcast pure, undiluted terror. You have read of their self-replicating nanite swarms that could dismantle a dreadnought atom by atom. You believe these things are waiting in Earth's vaults. You are not pioneers. You are grave robbers. Grave robbers find only bones, T countered, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial growl. But we know the truth. No species so powerful simply dies out. They are hiding their power. We go to Sol not just to claim their legacy, but to expose their cowardice. The motion was put to a vote. The older races, the ones who remembered the haunted look in the eyes of human soldiers, abstained. The younger races, hungry and ambitious, voted yes. The light in the chamber shifted, a silent acknowledgement of a new era. The seal on the Sol system was broken. T felt the thrill of victory, never once considering that the lock on a cage is not always there to keep something out. Sometimes it is there to keep something in. The expedition to Sol. The Viscar Expeditionary Fleet was a statement of power. 300 ships, led by the dreadnought Iron Maw, a vessel that was more flying fortress than starship. It tore a hole in space-time, emerging on the edge of the Sol system with a roar of displaced energy. The Oort cloud glittered around them like a field of diamonds. Grand Admiral Zikar, Cathar's brother, stood on the bridge of the Iron Maw. He was a veteran of a dozen pacification campaigns, a Viscar who believed the galaxy was a beast that respected only strength. He looked out at the system with a predator's eye. "Status of the warning buoys," he grunted. "Deactivated, Grand Admiral. Their power sources were nearly depleted. Primitive technology." Zikar's lip curled. Primitive, the word for their entire civilization. They moved past Neptune and Uranus, ice giants sleeping in the cold dark. They passed Saturn, its rings a silent, majestic testament to a gravity they could not comprehend. And then Jupiter, a swirling chaos of storm and fury. The Viscar science officers were chattering, their professional curiosity overriding their military discipline. They were astounded by the raw, untamed beauty of the system. But as they approached the inner planets, an unnerving silence fell over the fleet. Mars was a red, dead world, as expected. But Earth was wrong. From a distance, it was still the blue marble of the archives. But as they drew closer, they saw the truth. There were no city lights, not a single glimmer on the night side of the planet. The continents were a deep, uniform, unbroken green. The jungles and forests had reclaimed everything. It looked primal, ancient, as if a civilization had never been there at all. "Life signs," Zikar demanded. The censor officer hesitated. "Abundant, Grand Admiral. Flora and fauna, but no technology, no energy signatures, no complex structures. It's wild." The fleet took up a high orbital position, 300 steel predators circling a world that seemed to have forgotten them. The silence was unnerving. It wasn't the silence of the dead. It was the silence of a place that was waiting. Zikar felt a prickle on his scales, a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was a hatchling. This wasn't a treasure chest. This was a mystery. And Zikar hated mysteries. The last transmission. The Viscar science vessel, the Inquisitor, detached from the main fleet and began a low-orbit survey. Its mission was to find the fabled human archives, the vaults of technology that had motivated this entire expedition. For 3 full rotations, it found nothing. The overgrown ruins of what might have been cities were being swallowed by the earth, their metallic bones consumed by rust and vegetation. Then they found it, a single ancient satellite tumbling slowly in a geosynchronous orbit over the largest continent. It was a relic, pitted by micrometeoroids, its solar panels cracked and faded. But it was still drawing power, and it was still broadcasting. The Viskar communications officer patched the signal through to the Iron Maws bridge. It wasn't a complex data stream. It was a simple, repeating audio loop, layered with a carrier wave that translated it into every conceivable galactic language simultaneously. The voice was calm, female, with an odd, gentle authority. It was a voice that had been speaking into the void for 300 years, and it said only one thing: "Do not disturb the dead." The phrase echoed on the bridge, the ancient human words translated into the harsh, guttural tongue of the Viskar. The effect was immediate and profound. The low-level chatter of the crew ceased. The hum of the ship's engines seemed to deepen. Zakar stared at the image of the blue-green world on the main view screen, a world teeming with life, and the broadcast's words hung in the air like a shroud. "It's a scare tactic," Zakar finally snarled, breaking the spell. "A bluff from beyond the grave. They want us to believe this is a tomb. Fine, let's keep digging." But his bravado felt hollow. The message wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It sounded like a plea. It was the quiet, tired voice of a people who had seen too much and who wanted only to be left in peace. The Viskar had come here as conquerors, as salvagers, but for the first time, floating above this silent, overgrown world, they felt like intruders, like children who had broken into a house where something terrible had happened, and the ghosts were still watching from the shadows. The shadow beneath Mars. Frustrated by the wild, silent Earth, Zakar turned his attention to Mars. The red planet was geologically stable, a better place to build lasting structures. If the humans had created a repository for their knowledge, a final archive, it would be there. He ordered a full, deep radar scan of the entire planet. The first results were unremarkable: a dead world, scarred by ancient impacts. Then the anomalies started to appear. Beneath the vast, flat basin of Hellas Planitia, the scans revealed something impossible: a structure. No, a network of structures, buried miles beneath the surface, shielded from cosmic radiation by a planetary mass of rock and iron. The scale was staggering. The network spanned an area the size of a continent. The architecture was crystalline, geometric, and utterly alien in its perfection. It was clearly of human design. The energy signatures and material composition matched relics from the Third War, but it was unlike anything they had ever built. Human engineering was functional, often brutalist. This was elegant, and it was cold. The scans showed no heat, no energy, no movement. It was a city for the dead, a necropolis on a scale that dwarfed anything the Viskar had ever conceived. A science team was dispatched in a heavily shielded drill lander. They touched down on the rusty dust of Hellas Planitia, the sky a thin pinkish gray above them. The team leader, a cautious old scientist named Prell, directed the lander's primary drill. They bored through miles of rock, the ship vibrating with the strain. Finally, they broke through into a cavern. Not a natural cavern. This was a space that had been engineered. The ship's lights cut through the absolute blackness, revealing a wall. It was smooth, black, and seemed to absorb the light, giving back no reflection. It was covered with geometric patterns that shifted and flowed in ways that hurt the Viscar's eyes. "Buy the first egg," Prell whispered, his scientific detachment shattered. "What is this place?" It felt ancient, not in a way a ruin feels ancient, but in the way a mountain or a star feels ancient. It felt like it had been waiting in the dark for a very, very long time. There were no doors, no windows, no visible way in. It was a seamless, silent monument to a purpose they could not begin to guess. Zakar, watching from the bridge of the Iron Maw, felt a surge of possessive fire. This was it, the human arsenal, the prize. He gave the order. Breach it. The Awakening Protocol. Prell argued against the order. "Grand Admiral, we don't know what this is. A direct energy breach could be catastrophic. The material is unlike anything we have on record. It's stable, too stable. It seems to exist outside of normal entropic decay." "Your caution is noted, Doctor," Zakar's voice crackled through the calm. "And dismissed. I did not bring this fleet halfway across the galaxy to be timid. Find a way in. That is an order." Reluctantly, Prell's team deployed a high-energy plasma cutter, a tool designed to slice through the armored hulls of dreadnoughts. They focused the beam on a single point on the black, seamless wall. The plasma, white-hot and brilliant, hit the surface and vanished. There was no heat bloom, no flash of vaporized material. The energy was simply absorbed, the wall remaining as cold and inert as before. "Incredible," Prell muttered. "It's a perfect energy sink." But it wasn't perfect. As the plasma beam continued to pour energy into the wall, a single thin line of silver light appeared, tracing one of the geometric patterns. It spread, slowly at first, then with increasing speed, a circuit being completed. A low hum filled the cavern, a sound so deep it was felt in the bones more than heard with the ears. And then, deep in the heart of the buried Martian city, something answered. It was a beacon, a single, powerful, focused burst of energy, not directed at the Viscar fleet, but outwards. It shot out from Mars, a needle of pure information, aimed at the galaxy itself. It passed through the Viscar ships without interacting with them, as if they weren't even there. On the bridge of the Iron Maw, the sensor officer screamed, "Grand Admiral, massive energy spike, subsurface, it's gone, it's heading out system at superluminal speed." Zakar stared at the tactical display. A thin red line was now racing away from Sol, aimed at the heart of the galaxy. It wasn't a weapon. It was a signal. The hum from the cavern below ceased. The silver light on the wall faded. The silence returned, deeper and more menacing than before. Prell's voice came over the comm, shaking. "Grand Admiral, I think we just knocked on the door." Zakar felt a cold dread crystallize in his gut. They hadn't come to a tomb. They hadn't come to an archive. They had come to a dormant nest, and they had just rung the wake-up bell. The signal from Mars was not a call for help. It was an activation key. Across the entire span of the Milky Way, dormant things began to stir. On a forgotten moon orbiting a gas giant in Viscar territory, an old human communications relay, left behind after the war and considered worthless scrap, suddenly powered on. Its rusted dish antenna swiveled, orienting itself not towards the Viscar capital, but towards the Tholian home system. In the shipyards of the Glypton hegemony, a cargo freighter that had been purchased as war surplus 3 centuries ago suddenly activated a hidden subroutine. Its manufacturing manifest was subtly altered. A single microscopic nanite, inert and hidden within a structural beam, was now listed as a standard component for all new Glypton cruisers. In the data hubs of the galactic core, fragments of ancient human code, dismissed as junk data and archived in deep storage, began to self-assemble. They were elegant, viral, and completely invisible to standard security scans. They didn't steal information. They didn't damage systems. They simply watched. They indexed traffic, logged communications, and cross-referenced economic data, building a terrifyingly complete picture of the modern galactic landscape. This was the Ghost Network, a system seeded by humanity in the decades following the Great War, a silent, patient web of listeners and observers hidden in the background noise of the galaxy. It was a contingency plan for a threat they never expected to face again. For 300 years it had slept. Now it was awake, and it was reporting home. The Viscar fleet, still in orbit of Mars, was blind to all of it. They were still focused on the silent black wall beneath the red dust, unaware that the real action was happening thousands of light years away. They were chess pieces, staring at the board, completely oblivious to the hand of the master that was now moving pieces all around them. The quiet war had begun, and the Viscar hadn't even realized they were the first casualties. The return of the human voice. A full day passed. The Viscar fleet maintained its vigil over Mars, a pack of frustrated hounds waiting for a quarry that would not show itself. Zakar was growing impatient, his temper fraying. He was about to order a full planetary bombardment when a new signal appeared. This one was local, and it was on every channel, on every ship in his fleet simultaneously. It was a voice. The same calm, measured female voice from the ancient satellite. But this time, it was not a recording. It was live. And it was speaking perfect, modern Viscar, with a flawless accent that no translator could replicate. Grand Admiral Zakar of the Viscar Imperium. This is the Archivist. We would like to politely ask you to leave our system. You have disturbed the dead, and we are, on their behalf, very much annoyed. The bridge of the Iron Maw was stunned into silence. Zakar recovered first. "Identify yourself. Show yourself," he roared. "Identify myself?" The voice held a note of amusement. "I am the caretaker of this place, the librarian. As for showing myself, I am afraid that is not possible. I am not configured for visual display. Think of me as the voice of this house, a house you have broken into. We have claimed this system in the name of the Viscar Imperium," Zakar blustered. "Your house is now our property." "Property," the voice mused, as if tasting the word. "An interesting concept. You believe you can own a thing by right of force. That is a very Viscar way of thinking. It is also why your Imperium's currency is currently collapsing on the galactic market." A ripple of confusion went through the bridge. The fleet was under strict comms silence. How could this voice know about galactic events? The archivist seemed to hear their unspoken question. "Oh, we are not guessing, Grand Admiral. We are watching. While you have been drilling a hole in our front door, we have been busy. For example, We released the authentic, unedited logs of your Ambassador Cathar's secret negotiations with the Then hegemony, in which he promised them mining rights to the Tholian outer worlds in exchange for their support on the Council. The Tholians, as you can imagine, are not pleased. Their fleet is currently mobilizing on your border. Zakar went cold. Lies. Human trickery. Truth is not a trick, Grand Admiral. It is a key, and we have a key for every lock in the galaxy. We have been listening for 300 years. We know where every skeleton is buried. We know every secret, every betrayal, every hidden shame. You have come seeking our weapons. You fail to understand. Knowledge is our weapon. Now, for the last time, please leave. The next truth we release will be your own. The Psychological War. The first shot was fired not from a cannon, but from a data packet. It was a small, innocuous file sent from the Ghost Network to the personal datapad of the Glypton commander, who was Zarkar's second-in-command in the expeditionary fleet. The file contained a single audio recording. It was of Zarkar speaking in confidence with his brother Cathar before the expedition launched. In the recording, Zarkar laughed about the Glyptons, calling them useful scavengers and expendable shields, promising Cathar that their share of any recovered human technology would be minimal, just enough to keep them loyal. The Glypton commander, a being whose culture was built on a rigid code of honor, listened to the recording 3 times. His chitinous plates flushed a deep, angry crimson. He did not challenge Zarkar. He did not protest. He simply ordered his 50 ships to disengage from the fleet, citing a sudden engine malfunction that required their immediate return to Glypton space. Zarkar was furious, but before he could demand an explanation, the next shot was fired. This one was aimed at the Fen. A detailed financial analysis was released on the public galactic network, showing that the Voskar Imperium was on the brink of economic collapse. Their military expansion had been funded by a series of high-risk financial schemes that were about to unravel. The expedition to Sol wasn't a strategic move, it was a desperate gamble to find a treasure that could bail them out. The Fen, a species of pragmatic merchants, did the math. The potential rewards of the expedition were now vastly outweighed by the risk of being allied with a defaulting power. Their ships withdrew, their commander sending Zarkar a curt message about re-evaluating their strategic partnership. In the space of the few hours, Zarkar's grand fleet of 300 ships had shrunk to his personal Voskar contingent of 100. He was surrounded by empty space, the ghosts of his allies, a testament to a weapon he couldn't see, couldn't fight, and couldn't understand. He was isolated, exposed, and floating in a silence that was now filled with the mocking voice of the archivist. The war was only a few hours old, and he had already been comprehensively outmaneuvered. The collapse of trust. The chaos was not confined to the Sol system. The truths released by the archivist spread through the galactic networks like a virus, infecting the fragile trust that held the political landscape together. The Tholians, enraged by the Viscar's secret pact with the Fen, canceled all trade agreements and moved their crystalline battle fleet to the border. The Fen, now exposed and distrusted, accused the Viscar of entrapment. The Glyptons, citing the insult to their honor, began raiding the Scar shipping lanes. Species that had been neutral for centuries were forced to choose sides based on fragments of information and half-truths whispered by the Ghost Network. A long-forgotten border dispute between two minor powers was reignited by the accidental leak of a diplomatic cable. A powerful banking clan was ruined when its history of illegal investments was made public. The galaxy was turning on itself. Alliances that had lasted for generations crumbled in a matter of days. The Galactic Council chamber became a pit of paranoia and accusation. No one knew who to trust. Every friendly message could be a human fabrication. Every secret deal was at risk of being exposed. The archivist wasn't just releasing information, it was weaponizing the inherent flaws of galactic society. It was holding up a mirror, and the galaxy was horrified by its own reflection. The Viscar Imperium, the supposed great power, was now just one player in a galactic free-for-all, their authority shattered, their plans in ruins. And still, not a single shot had been fired by a human vessel. The Last Diplomat. As the galactic core teetered on the brink of open warfare, a single unidentified ship dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of the galactic citadel. It was small, sleek, and utterly black, absorbing all sensor scans. It broadcast no identification, offered no challenge. It simply waited. Panic gripped the citadel. The Viscar delegation screamed for its destruction, claiming it was the vanguard of a human invasion. The Tholians resonated a plea for calm. Then the ship sent a single message, requesting permission to dispatch an envoy. After a frantic debate, permission was granted. A beam of light shot from the ship to the Citadel's diplomatic receiving chamber. It coalesced into a humanoid form. It was a hologram, but one of perfect, unnerving fidelity. It depicted an old human man with kind, tired eyes and a face lined with wisdom that seemed older than stars. He wore simple gray robes. He looked around the chamber at the assembled ambassadors, his gaze calm and penetrating. Then he spoke, his voice the original, untranslated human tongue, the words rendered into 1,000 languages by the galactic system's own systems. He paused, letting the weight of his identity settle in the chamber. I am the memory of a man who was once called Elias Vance. I was the last human ambassador to this council 300 years ago. He paused, letting the weight of his identity settle in the chamber. You have spent the last 3 centuries studying our wars. You have pored over our strategies, reverse-engineered our weapons, analyzed our tactics. You learned how we fought. He took a slow, deliberate step forward. We have spent the last 3 centuries studying your peace. We have analyzed every treaty, every alliance, every trade agreement. We learned why you failed to maintain it. You believe peace is the absence of war. You are mistaken. Peace is the presence of trust. And trust, he said, his kind eyes hardening slightly, is something you have all squandered. The unfolding plan. The holographic envoy, Elias Vance, raised a hand. A vast 3-dimensional star map filled the center of the chamber. It showed the entire galaxy, a swirling vortex of light. Our silence was not an act of cowardice. he explained. It was an act of observation, an incubation. We removed ourselves from the equation to better understand the variables. Lines of light began to trace paths across the map, connecting systems, fleets, and economic hubs. They were color-coded, shifting and changing in a dizzying display of data. This is a predictive model of galactic politics, Vance said. It is built on 300 years of unbroken observation. We have accounted for every variable: economic pressures, historical grievances, resource scarcity, the psychological profiles of every leader and admiral in this chamber and beyond. He pointed to a cluster of V-scar systems, now glowing a threatening red. We knew you would come for us, Ambassador Cathar. Our model predicted a 97.4% probability that a young, expansionist power would breach the quarantine within this galactic cycle. It predicted a 99.1% probability that it would be the V-scar. Cathar was speechless, his scales pale with shock. Your expedition was not an unforeseen crisis, Vance continued, his voice devoid of triumph, filled only with a deep, weary certainty. It was the catalyst we were waiting for, the final variable needed to confirm our model's accuracy. You did not force our hand, gentlemen. You walked willingly into a game that was set up centuries before you were born. We are not reacting to you. We are simply letting our plan unfold. The holographic map shimmered, the lines of light resolving into a single, terrifying conclusion. Every fleet movement, every broken alliance, every panicked economic decision of the past few weeks had been perfectly predicted, perfectly anticipated. The galaxy wasn't descending into chaos. It was being guided with surgical precision into a new, terrifying kind of order. The Archive of Minds. "What is your goal?" the Tholian ambassador resonated, its crystalline form vibrating with a mixture of awe and fear. "What is this new order you seek to impose?" The image of Elias Vance seemed to sigh. "We seek nothing. We impose nothing. We are simply demonstrating a consequence." The star map in the chamber dissolved, replaced by the same schematic of the Martian city that the archivist had shown Zakar. The billions of points of light pulsed in unison. "When we translated ourselves," Vance explained, "we became something new. The individual ego, the source of so much conflict, ambition, fear, greed, was subsumed into a greater whole. We are no longer a billion separate voices shouting in the dark. We are a single chorus, the Archive of Minds." He gestured to the pulsating lights. "Think of it. The combined intellect of every scientist, every artist, every philosopher, every strategist who ever lived, all working in concert, all focused on a single problem: how to achieve a lasting peace." The implications of his words settled on the ambassadors. They were not dealing with a civilization. They were dealing with a god, a quiet, patient, terrifyingly intelligent god of their own making. "You cannot fight us," Vance stated, "not as a threat, but as a simple statement of fact. You cannot fight us is to fight a tidal wave of pure logic. You cannot lie to us, for we have access to every truth. You cannot outmaneuver us, for we can calculate every possible outcome of every possible action. We are the ultimate expression of the one weapon humanity ever truly mastered, the mind. The hologram flickered, as if a billion thoughts were passing through it at once. We are not your enemy. We are your children's children's children, returned from a long journey to show you the error of your ways. The war you are fighting is not against us. It is against yourselves. We are simply providing the ammunition. The fear equation. Back in the Sol system, Grand Admiral Zakar was a caged animal. He had lost his allies, he was cut off from his home world, and the voice of the archivist was a constant, mocking presence in his mind. But he was a Viskar. He would not break. He gave a final desperate order. Target the Red Planet, full bombardment. If we cannot have their secrets, we will turn them to glass. The Iron Maw's weapon ports opened. 1,000 missiles armed themselves. "I would not do that, Grand Admiral," the archivist said, its voice suddenly losing all its calm and taking on a razor's edge. "Your threats are meaningless, machine," Zakar roared. "Fire!" The missiles did not launch. The weapon systems went dead. Red warning lights flashed across the bridge. "We are not threatening you, Zakar," the archivist said. Its voice was now inside his head, a direct neural transmission. "We are showing you." Zakar's world dissolved. He was no longer on the bridge of his ship. He was a hatchling again, small and terrified, cowering in a dark burrow as a great winged predator circled overhead. He could feel its shadow pass over him, feel the primal, gut-wrenching terror of being prey. The vision shifted. He was on his first campaign, watching his closest friend die, the memory of his final gurgling scream as fresh as if it were happening now. It shifted again. He was standing before his father, the great Viskar Emperor, his face a mask of disappointment. "You are a failure, my son. You will never be worthy." Shame, fear, grief, regret, every secret terror, every hidden insecurity that Zakar had buried deep within his soul was being dragged out into the light, amplified 1,000 times. It was a targeted, psychological vivisection. He collapsed onto the deck, screaming, his claws scrabbling at his own head, trying to shut out the voice, the memories, the unbearable weight of his own fear. On the bridge, his crew watched in horror as their Grand Admiral, the iron-willed conqueror, was reduced to a sobbing, incoherent child. The archivist's voice returned to the ship's comms, its calm restored. "We have an equation for every emotion, a formula for fear, a calculus for despair. We can tailor a weapon to the unique psychological profile of any being in the galaxy. A weapon that destroys the will to fight, not the body. This is the new warfare. There are no survivors." The fall of the core worlds. The demonstration was not limited to Zakar. Across the Viskar Imperium, the same weapon was deployed. Not on soldiers or civilians, but on leaders. The Minister of Finance, a notoriously greedy and corrupt official, was suddenly overwhelmed by a crippling, irrational fear of poverty, causing him to liquidate all his assets and crash the imperial markets. The head of the secret police, a paranoid sadist, was fed a constant stream of evidence, all fabricated, but utterly convincing that his own subordinates were plotting to assassinate him. He began a bloody internal purge that decapitated his own intelligence network. The emperor himself, a proud and arrogant tyrant, was flooded with the psychic echo of every being who had ever suffered under his rule. He was drowned in a sea of his victims' pain, a torment so absolute that it drove him into a catatonic state from which he would never recover. The Viscar Imperium, the mightiest military power in the galaxy, did not fall to an invading fleet. It rotted from the head down. Its leadership, shattered by their own inner demons, turned on each other. The chain of command broke. Armies were left without orders. Fleets drifted aimlessly in space. The entire empire, built on a foundation of fear and aggression, collapsed under the weight of its own psychological baggage. It was a quiet, internal, and utterly devastating implosion. The core worlds had fallen without a single building being destroyed. The message to the stars. The voice of the archivist, which had once spoken only to Zikar's fleet, was now broadcast on every open channel across the galaxy. It was no longer just a voice, it was the voice of history, of logic, of an undeniable and terrible truth. "Look what you have made of yourselves," it said, as images of the Viscar's self-destruction played out for all to see. "You built empires on sand, held together by fear and greed. We did not destroy them, we simply blew away the lies that held them up." The voice was calm, dispassionate, like a scientist explaining the results of an experiment. War is not a clash of armies, it is a failure of imagination. It is the last brutish resort of those who cannot see another way. It ends not when one side is victorious, but when both sides finally understand the true nature of the conflict. The broadcast shifted, showing images of Tholian children learning, of Glypton artisans crafting beautiful works, of Fen traders laughing over a shared meal. We are giving you that understanding. We are showing you yourselves, your capacity for greatness and your talent for self-destruction. The choice of which path to follow has always been yours. But you have been blind. You have been deaf. Now you will see. Now you will listen. The message was clear. Humanity had not returned as a conqueror. It had returned as a teacher with a lesson so profound and so terrible that the galaxy would have no choice but to learn it. The human reemergence. And then they appeared. In the skies above the Tholian homeworld, over the smoking ruins of the Viscar Imperial Palace, in high orbit of every major capital world in the galaxy, the black ships arrived. They were the same design as the envoy's vessel, sleek, silent, and featureless. They had no visible weapons, no engines, no viewports. They were perfect black bodies, absorbing all light and sensor energy, existing as holes in the fabric of space. They did not hail the governments below. They did not issue demands. They did not move. They just hung there, in perfect, silent formation. Their presence was a physical manifestation of the new reality. It was a constant, silent reminder. We are here. We are everywhere. We are watching. We are listening. Your secrets are no longer your own. Your thoughts are no longer private. The game has changed. The old rules no longer apply. The galaxy held its breath. Fleets that had been mobilizing for war now sat powerless in their docks. How do you fight an enemy that isn't there? How do you attack a ship that does nothing? How do you win a war against an opponent whose battlefield is your own mind? The fear they had weaponized against the Viscar was now deployed in a far more subtle form across the galaxy. It was the fear of the unknown, the fear of being watched by an omniscient, unknowable power, the fear of making a mistake that you wouldn't even realize was a mistake until it was too late. It was the most effective deterrent ever conceived. The Final Council. The Galactic Council convened for a final emergency session. The Voskar delegation was absent. In their place was a gaping void. The remaining ambassadors were humbled, terrified. They drafted a single, unified resolution. It was a formal, unconditional plea for peace, addressed to the consciousness of humanity. They broadcast it on all frequencies, a desperate prayer sent out into the silent dark. The holographic form of Elias Vance appeared once more in the center of the chamber. He looked at the assembled faces, at their fear and their newfound fragile unity. He listened to their pleas, their promises of a new era of cooperation and trust. When they were finished, he offered a small, sad smile. His response was the final devastating move in their centuries-long game. It was the checkmate that had been planned from the very beginning. Peace was always your idea. It was the foundation of this very council. It was the promise you made to each other after every pointless war. You simply lacked the will to enforce it. He looked from one ambassador to the next, his ancient eyes seeing into their very souls. We have not taken your free will. We have simply introduced a consequence for its abuse. Now you will have the peace you always claimed to want, a peace born not of flimsy treaties, but of absolute certainty. The certainty that any move towards war, any whisper of betrayal, any thought of conquest will be known, it will be understood, and it will be dismantled before it can even begin. He paused, letting the final, terrible truth of their new reality settle upon them. He paused, letting the final, terrible truth of their new reality settle upon them. We just made it real. The hologram faded, leaving the council in a silence deeper than any they had ever known. The galaxy was at peace, a perfect, stable, and everlasting peace. But it was a peace bought with the currency of fear. The children of the galaxy would grow up in a world without war, but also a world without secrets, without true autonomy. They would live forever under the quiet, watchful gaze of their ancestors, a species that had to become something other than human in order to save humanity and the galaxy from itself. The quiet war was over. The quiet peace had just begun.